Welcome to Death, Sex and Taxes, the podcast where we talk about things that most people avoid. I'm Aurelia, I'm a therapist and a coach, and this is the space for the real stuff, the uncomfortable, the unspoken, and the undeniably human. Each week we'll explore the messy, the beautiful, and the challenging parts of being alive, from grief and intimacy to money and meaning. So if you're ready to get honest, you're in the right place. Let's go. Firstly, I want to tell you a bit of a story about how this podcast got its name and what it means to me. So one evening I was sitting with my grandma, who was living with us at the time. She had recently had a stroke, which had mainly affected her body, so her mind was still sharp. And we were just sitting, talking. I was on a little chair at the edge of her bed, and we were talking about all of her life stories, what she had done, where I wanted to go in the future, and how I wanted to help people. At the time, I was training as a therapist and I was already qualified as a coach. And my desire to help people was strong, and my curiosity around all these different areas of life, what it means to be a human, what makes people tick, how to overcome trauma, and everything in between. My curiosity was huge. And so I asked her, I said, maybe one day I would start a podcast and help people that way, spread information and share things I had learned. And I asked her, if you had to encapsulate life, all of life, into 3 words, what would those 3 words be? And she sat there for a minute and she looked up and she was thinking. And then with a cheeky smile on her face, she replied to me, death, sex and taxes. And we burst into laughter, and it was one of those really fond memories that I have. It was so unexpected and yet so bang on, is what I thought. And that was her magic, being able to shock you and comfort you all in one breath. And I thought she was right. Nothing makes people evaluate their life more than grief or death. And I could attest to that, as I was specialising in grief counselling at the time. It brings clarity, it brings urgency, and it brings truth to whatever the experience you're going through. But I do think there's that re-evaluation that happens. And death doesn't exist in isolation. Death affects your life. It touches everything in life, the direction that we go in, the people that we meet, the friends, the decisions that we make. It affects it all. And so when you're talking about death, you're also talking about life. You're talking about what it means, what you value, why you do what you do. So death encompassed life. I understood that one. I then asked her about sex. I said, what do you mean by sex? And she said, well, sex can encompass many things. It can be relationships, that's what it can stand for. Relationships with other people, platonic or not, relationships with yourself, relationships with others, relationships with faith if you have one, relationships with your body. It's about that intimacy and connection that we have with the world around us and with those that are in it. And I thought, okay. And then I asked, what about taxes? And she said to me it was her way of talking about the system. The control, the power, the structures of how we operate, and of course also money being the way that we operate and the way that we exchange in the world. And as we were sitting there, after the laughter had subsided and after we were thinking about the depth of what has been said, we both thought that I think she's come up with a good one. Let me know in the comments if you feel that I've missed anything, because I'd be really curious. And something I like about these 3 words is that most of the time you can't talk about them. They're politically incorrect. They're not what you talk about at the dinner table or at the pub with your friends. And I really wanted to give voice to that was unspoken, the things that you can't say, the things that you can't talk about, yet that affect our lives so hugely. I wanted to share information and have honest conversations about the truths that happen in life. And to be honest, I wanted to replicate in a small way what I do in the therapy room with people. A place where you can truly be honest, sometimes a space where things might have been spoken for the first time. And maybe a space where you can go where you're allowed to talk without judgment, or that I can present something in a way that has no judgment, because oftentimes in the therapy room that might be the only place where that can happen. And I feel that so many of these topics, when given voice, is actually what connects us all. It's our ordinariness, our humanness, our emotional depth, and our capacity to feel one another that is what connects us. Not those extraordinary feats, but what all of us go through. And to me, those are these 3 big topics that are often so unspoken. Everyone experiences them, and yet no one is allowed to talk about them. For example, we all experience death. All of us will die at some point, and throughout our lives, I'm assuming all of us will experience death of another. It's a human and natural experience, yet no one will talk about it. and it's such a difficult topic for so many. We will all navigate relationships, and money is the currency that currently we're trading through. Yet, why are these fundamentals so difficult to talk about? And so for this first episode, I wanted to talk about the cost of avoiding the uncomfortable things in life. We avoid hard conversations, we scroll instead of feeling. We laugh things off, we stay busy. We ghost, we overwork, we say you're fine when you're not. But what is the cost to all of those? Let me start by explaining what emotional avoidance is, and it's not just I'm not going to talk about that today. Avoidance can come in so many different forms and will show itself in different ways for different people. Some will come in the form of distracting oneself, some will come in the form of denial, perfectionism, numbing with things like food, sex, alcohol. But these types of avoidance are not a form of weakness, they're actually a form of protection for you. This mechanism worked for you at some point in the past, and you've probably kept doing it to be able to deal with difficult situations now. But over time, that strategy starts to come with a hidden cost. So let's do a cost analysis together. These are 4 things that can happen when you go into emotional avoidance. Firstly, emotional build-up. When we try and suppress something, all that happens is you push it down, and yet it will leach out in your life in other areas. When you push things like grief, shame, or fear, all that happens is it goes underground and it will find a different way to escape. This might come out in ways like anxiety, control issues, burnout, irritability. It will find a way to express itself, just not in the way that you thought. And it's almost like a Coke can. When you shake that Coke can, all these built up emotions is every shake. So you push it down, that's a shake. You push another one down and you shake it again. And now you have this can that's ready to explode. And when you open that top, poof, it all comes out. But again, not in the way that you expect, because you've been shaking that can the whole time. And you don't know where those bubbles are going to go when you open the can. Number 2, stunned intimacy. In relationships, when you don't address the hard stuff, that's what actually is creating distance between you. And relationships are for closeness, for close friendships, family, friends, partners. It's the closeness that you want from one another, that support, that trust. And yet when we keep avoiding difficult emotions, difficult conversations, all that's happening is you're creating that distance between the two of you. You start to lose the realness, you start to lose the honesty, and you start to lose the trust, all because that distance starts to creep in. The more you avoid something, the bigger that distance becomes, because people will try and come close and you're going to pull away even more. And this creates a bit of a problem when navigating relationships with each other. Number 3, the body knows. So chronic avoidance can often manifest in the body as well. Physically, I'm speaking. You might start to get headaches, gut issues, back pain, fatigue, and so many more other physical conditions. Your body will take the burden because you're not allowing those emotions out. It's where it's expressing. Your body is holding it for you. There's a great book called The Body Keeps the Score. I'm probably going to get his name wrong, by Bessel van der Kolk, who talks about this a lot. If you want to check it out, I'll put a link in the description. And number 4, stuckness and shame cycles. Avoiding discomfort can often keep us stuck in this loop, looping in the same arguments, looping in the same patterns, and the same self-sabotage. And then we can often shame ourselves for not being better. Why do I keep doing this? What's going on with me? And this loop continues. Until we stop and feel what needs to come out, this cycle's going to continue. We need to look at the thing that we're avoiding. And when you understand it, that's when things will start to shift. So as you can kind of see here, avoidance isn't free. You're just putting that price on your future self. And that's the end of our cost analysis. So let's talk about when we don't avoid things. When we start to face what we've been running from. We can gain such an emotional release, a new sense of clarity, and that feeling of freedom of being unburdened by yourself. You finally looked at what you needed to look at, you've stopped avoiding it, and it's literally like taking a weight off your shoulders, putting the burden down. And it can often come with a strength as well, because you're no longer burdened by yourself. You have a new lightness and a new power that allows you to move forward. And looking at these pushed down, repressed emotions isn't about fixing you, nor is it about being fearless and pushing through anyway. It's about being honest with how you are and what's really going on. I thought I would share a story with you about my own avoidance. I used to have this fear of being seen. I knew I wanted to build a business. I knew I wanted to help people. I knew I had something to be able to share with others. I knew I wanted to be vulnerable with my friends, to let them see all sides of me and not just the good parts. You can kind of see here how this fear of being seen translated in all areas of my life, which meant I was avoiding doing all of these things in all different areas of my life. I wasn't showing up online. I wasn't starting my business. I wasn't being totally honest with my friends when I wasn't feeling great, or when I needed to ask for help. And so this avoidant behaviour around that fear is what was keeping me stuck. And so I was able to identify that actually this is the fear. It is the fear of being seen. And I sat with myself and I journaled about it and I wrote about it, and that's what came out for me. And at the time I was working with a coach, and we did timeline therapy together around this. And it's basically where you go back and rewire your subconscious mind around that belief where you first took it on. And for me, it came down to a grieving moment. A moment where I didn't want someone else to see me sad because it would make them sad to see me sad. And so in that moment, I took on the belief that it's not safe to be seen. I'm afraid to be seen. And it's funny because that then transpired everywhere. And yet it was completely irrational. That's not true. Which is often the case with beliefs. You take them and they're irrational, but that doesn't necessarily make them true for you now. Or true at the time either. It's just what your brain made meaning at the time. This fear of being seen was actually protecting me. It was protecting me from being vulnerable, protecting me from feeling vulnerable when I didn't feel like I had support. So knowing this allowed me to create some room to be able to move through it. And so here I am, out the other side of that. I no longer hold that belief. And I am very much being seen. Here we are, starting a podcast, talking publicly about the unspoken, talking about the things that live in the shadows, the things that can't be seen, the things that can't be spoken about, the things that can't be addressed. So I invite you to ponder this question. What's one thing that you've been avoiding that has been quietly shaping your life? Maybe write it down, maybe name it, maybe talk to someone that you feel comfortable about. Use them as a sounding board to understand yourself deeper. And if you do understand it, maybe it's time to start working on that, to shift that belief, to change it, and to be able to move through it. Sometimes it just needs space to be able to breathe, and just being acknowledged is enough. Sometimes it needs belief work. However you want to do it, there are so many ways that you can overcome them. But it all starts with acknowledging what it is. And I want this podcast to be a space where we can talk about everything, with no shame, no judgment, just honesty and truth. So if you feel that any of that resonated with you and it's up your street, subscribe, share, and leave a review. And if there's something that you've been avoiding, DM me or leave me a comment. I'd love to hear your story.